Ticci Toby is a real, actual story that was written by a completely serious human being. This information will be relevant once we start getting into why this story is a more painful experience than pulling a botfly maggot out of the tip of your dick. Now, the story that I read for this review is one I found on our favorite website, Wattpad. It's called Ticci Toby Origins, or something like that. So I'm guessing this is the original story and not some kind of spin-off or sequel. Because yes, this story is popular enough to warrant a lot of those. So let's get into this story, and why it's so bad that it makes me want to stick an ice pick in my kneecap and just twist it until I can never walk again. This feels like a story that was compiled from a bunch of trash left on the ground. But instead of just picking the trash up and throwing it away, someone held onto it and made it into something new and equally worthless as the trash it was made out of. The trash it was made out of is pretty easily recognizable. This pasta of course falls into the villainous character promoting slasher fanfiction category of creepypastas. All the story and character beats are present and in full force. You have a young, isolated teenager who's been bullied and has an abusive and negligent family. Due to this, the action of killing his family is completely justified and thus rendered completely not scary. Ticci Toby also has a character for the female readers to project themselves onto, someone Toby cares about to show that he's not such a bad guy after all. This character comes to us in the form of his dead sister, and personally, I don't blame her for being dead. If I was in this shitty story, I'd look for a way out too. However, beyond the uninspired characters and premise, Ticci Toby does something even more heinous and unforgivable on a storytelling level, but I'll get deeper into that later. For now, let's move on. Our hero, Toby, is just your average small-town high school kid, except he isn't average at all by any stretch of the imagination. Unlike Jeff the Killer, which has never managed to establish anything about the character besides enjoys long walks on the beach and excessive murder, Ticci Toby actually manages to try and make a character, unsuccessfully I might add. Toby is melancholic and reserved, and while he has a reason to be, which is to say the dead sister bullying and abusive father, these reasons are incredibly contrived, cliched, and don't serve to make him interesting. His nameless sister only exists to serve the purpose of making Toby more sympathetic, something that this story already tries to do harder than Jeff did. We're supposed to think, oh, his sister died, that's sad, I feel bad for him. But we don't know a fucking thing about his sister, so we don't care about her. But we don't know a thing about either of them at the point that this information is revealed, so we don't care. Named characters dying stops taking a toll on an audience after a while of being exposed to it, especially if we didn't have much connection to the character in the first place. So having a nameless family member die isn't any better. This is Battlefield Earth level of character writing. Now, a dead family member we don't know about can be used well. It can spark a character's motivations, create a mystery as to the true cause of their death, and so on. Take TribeTwelve for example. The first thing we learn in the series is that Milo dies, but we don't know anything about him. It's what happens next that makes it matter. Not only do we see Milo in the past and learn bits and pieces about his and Noah's relationship, we also get the information that the circumstances behind his death may not be as they appear. This is what's called a hook in writing. What's important to note here is that Milo's death isn't just used as a plot device to get the story rolling. We clearly see how it's still affecting Noah years later, and it lets us learn more about him. What matters isn't the family member that died, it's how the other characters we do care about are affected by it. But over the course of the story, we don't get to know Toby beyond this one detail about why he's so sad, so we don't care. Then you have the dad who's just a boring, dull, cliched, abusive, drunk father stereotype. The mother is pretty much a battered housewife who kind of ignores all the bullshit that goes on with the dad and Toby. She's a lot like the mother character from Clockwork. In fact, this whole story is very similar to Clockwork. But that's not the only thing here that's derivative. Let's take a look at the story itself. Our story begins with our main character Toby on a car ride with his stupid ass family. The writing style here is actually pretty okay. It's one of the few good things I can say about this story, at least for this first part. There's actually quite a few grammar errors as well as some small writing quirks that could be tweaked or fixed, but hey, the author is trying to create an atmosphere. That's more than I can say for Jeff or Clockwork or really any other story in this genre. Lots of time is spent describing the characters' appearances and mindsets. It's leagues more in depth than, and then Jeff the Killer put on his white hoodie that was covered in blood over his sexy ass 13-year-old body, and he thought about murder because he loves murder so much. I will say it does go on for maybe a bit too long. The simple establishing car ride takes up quite a few paragraphs, and they're not short either. This isn't that long of a story either. So now let's get more into Toby, who is easily the biggest problem in this story, as you can well imagine. Toby Rogers is a teenager who suffers from an incredibly rare disorder that makes it so he is unable to feel any pain at all. Now, this is a real disease referred to as congenital insensitivity to pain, but the thing is that this is such a rare disease that it seems ludicrous to include it in your story. You could have a kid who has Harlequin syndrome or Cyrenomyelia and it would be more realistic. Another thing is that this disorder requires constant medical care, especially in children, since they're unable to feel pain. They have no idea what's dangerous and what's not, or they hurt themselves but don't seek aid or treatment because to them nothing has happened. They don't even realize they're hurt. However, this story treats it almost like some kind of invulnerability rather than a severe handicap. This is not a good disorder to have. You can't just walk into fire and walk out unscathed. Your skin is still going to be falling off your body. Not to mention your body may not properly release the adrenaline that you would feel in life or death situations because of the pain you should be feeling. If this disorder were treated like the handicap it is, I wouldn't have as big a problem as I do. But because when it is scarcely brought up, it's treated as nothing but a good thing, it inherently detracts from the story. On the topic of disorders scarcely brought up, Toby also has Tourette syndrome. Hey, how many fucking birth defects does this guy have? Were his parents brother and sister that were just a little bit too close? He's homeschooled because of this after kids bullied him for his tics and twitches, calling him Ticci Toby. There's the title. Everyone take your shots, we made it. I'll give you one guess as to how many times this is brought up. Once. This bit where Toby and his weird medical quirks are introduced is the only time it's ever brought up. I can only assume that it's because having your badass self-insert serial killer protagonist stuttering and twitching every sentence would be more funny than scary.
Coming from my ass!
But it's his fucking naming convention. Again, much like Clockwork, it's like this guy just thought of the name Ticci Toby before he even wrote the story and just went with the whole Tourette syndrome thing and never brought it up again. It's really distracting. When you introduce something in a story, a concept or character trait or ability, you want it to have some kind of payoff. Hey look, this dumb bitch from the Lost World Jurassic Park is on the gymnastics team and she uses gymnastics to kill a raptor. Set up, payoff. It can even be as awful and stupid and movie-breaking as that shit, and it'll still be better writing than setup and no payoff. You don't tell the setup for a joke and forget the punchline. So our emotionless, bland, personality-lacking protagonist reminisces about the car accident that he is currently recovering from that killed his sister. When you do a better job at describing a character that will have zero narrative impact on the story than you do your protagonist, you've fucked up big time. Here's where what we discussed earlier with his sister comes into play. We've established that his sister is dead, and now we get to see the impact it has on our protagonist. Except all it does is turn him into this boring, emotionless husk, and it's hard to tell whether it's intentional for the reader to insert themselves into Toby, or in a female reader's case, his sister's shoes, or if it's done because the author is incapable of writing a legitimate internal conflict caused by the death of a family member. It might actually be both. Anyway, we get to Toby's dad, who is generic drunk father stereotype number 695. He's just kind of a drunk asshole with no rhyme or reason, no depth. He's simply someone to project your own frustrations on. He's so generic and transparent, it's absurd. He doesn't even remember how old his son is. Also, upon rereading this, I guess Toby's sister does have a name that's brought up twice. Lyra. The story just loves to bring shit up and then drop it forever. Even after her name is established, she constantly refers to her as my sister. I missed it when I skimmed through it a few times, actively looking for it when I was writing that earlier segment. It missed me both times. We get more background on just how big of a dick his dad is, and all the time, we're just left to wonder why they didn't just call the cops on this cunt. And we get a first glimpse into what I brought up earlier on his inability to feel pain being seen as a positive. He can't feel the beatings his father father gives him. I'll bring up the point of this being a huge handicap again. Imagine a situation where this kid is getting the shit beat out of him in an environment he can't escape from, and he has no idea if the injuries he's receiving are serious. He could have broken bones or ruptured organs. He might have to be rushed to the hospital and not even know it because of this disorder. Like, holy shit, there's some real tension there, right? But no, he just leveled up his character enough to the point where he can't be damaged anymore. It's bullshit. This kid is basically fucking Kirito.
That's adorable. You think they're a threat.
So Toby thinks he sees something out of the corner of his eye in his room. Believe it or not, instead of just being set up for absolutely nothing, this is actually foreshadowing to something. And what it's foreshadowing to is something really fucking stupid. Toby's mom comes in his room that night and they talk about his asshole dad, and we're left with a lot of questions. Okay, so his dad clearly doesn't live with them anymore because Toby asked when the fuck he's gonna leave already. Got that, so far so good. They're probably divorced or something. But why is he here in the first place? Like, Toby's mom explains that he's there because he wanted to see Toby, but he's an abusive asshole who didn't bother to show up when his daughter was dying. This is something I can actually sympathize with to a shocking level. When I was 1 and my sister was 3, we both caught a strain of the E. coli virus. My sister got it a lot worse than me and almost died, and my good old pops didn't even show up at the hospital once. This kid is still in fucking hospital scrubs from the accident, and you mean to tell me that this battered housewife is that fucking quick to forgive this asshole? Does she have Stockholm syndrome, or is the dick just that good? Is everyone in this family fucking crazy? Also, apparently he's staying for quite some time, but why? Doesn't he have somewhere else to go? Where does he live? Who is he living with? Why is he fucking here in the first place? I can't get over this shit. When you present this character who is obviously an antagonistic force in your story, you have to give a reason for him to be there. If he legitimately wants to reconnect with his son and fix the mistakes he's made, establish that. It seems like he's just here so we can be an asshole and justify our main character going psycho. Alright, let's get into my absolute least favorite part of this fucking story. So Toby can't sleep that night because he's haunted by I don't fucking care. He looks out the window of his room and what does he see? I'll give you a guess if you hadn't read the story. You might get it right. If you haven't read the story or don't know anything about it, I actually want you to leave a comment at this moment giving me your guess on what he sees. Go on, I'll wait. Okay, you good? He looks out his window and sees fucking Slenderman. No, that's not a joke. That is the crux of this story. Toby is visited by Slenderman and becomes a generic, uninspired Marble Hornets clone proxy. Slenderman himself is a topic that I'm going to be covering in an upcoming video. It's a bit of a ways off though, so I won't get into too much detail on my opinions on him right now. But the subject I'm going to bring him up in isn't literature, so I'll get my thoughts out on this right now. Is it possible to make good literature featuring Slenderman? Potentially. There have been non-video blogs about Slenderman. There's actually quite a few of them, but I haven't read any, and there's kind of a reason for that. For me, Slenderman works on visual medium. Simply describing the fact that it's a guy without a face doesn't cut it for me. At least not in really long stories like an ARG. The Something Awful thread that created him came with a couple of short stories, but those were simply meant to establish the character rather than work as their own self-contained stories. Like, you wouldn't see those uploaded on the Creepypasta wiki as their own stories. And in this story, it's used to its absolute lowest potential. Seriously, the only thing it does right is not have Slenderman be an established character in universe that Toby recognizes. Rather than doing anything new or interesting with Slenderman, he just kind of shows up and manipulates Toby and turns him into a proxy. Now, the absolute worst part of this is that now the story has no identity whatsoever. This is no longer the story of Toby, this is yet another Slenderman story. The story is trying to coast off the fame of something already established and that its reader might already find scary as a substitute for creative writing and actual scare. Like, no, seriously, fucking sky's the limit now, right? Slenderman shows up, who's next? Jeff the Killer? Squidward? Smile Dog? How many creepypasta characters RSVP'd to this party? Man. Fuck you, story. So yeah, whatever. Toby sees Slenderman just standing out on the street and becomes kind of like hypnotized by him before just falling asleep. He wakes up the next morning, but nothing notable has happened. He's just kind of in this mental fog, but he's honestly such a bland character that it's difficult to tell if anything has changed about him. Writing 101. If you want to write an inexplicably popular character, this is absolutely the way to go.
This is gonna be my whole day, isn't it?
So basically afterwards, Toby's dad sticks around for, again, no fucking reason, and Toby himself just kinda stays alone in his room, bored. He gets so bored that he starts to chew the flesh off of his own hands. Wait a second, am I reading a joke script? No, that's actually what fucking happens next. Like, if you were under the influence of Slenderman at that particular moment, then yeah, sure, I guess. I don't see what Slenderman gets out of that, but yeah, sure, why not? But he's just fucking bored alone in his room. Nothing in the story indicates that Slenderman has anything to do with this. Doesn't this kid have a computer in his room? Doesn't he have a stash of weird porn hidden deep within the confines of his System 32? You know, right next to spongecry.avi? So his mom catches him doing this, but doesn't even take him to the hospital immediately. She just wraps it up with first aid. The fucking kid ate his hands off, you dumb bimbo. No wonder your husband beats you. It's only once it's clear that Toby's in severe need of brain medicine that she takes him to a counselor. I'm talking like hearing colors and feeling smells shit, okay? The whole eating his own hands thing is dropped immediately and is secondary to why he's going to this counselor. Hey, are you sure Toby doesn't have ADHD too? Because that's the only way I can rationalize introducing and forgetting so many fucking plot points. Whatever, he talks to the counselor about the car crash that killed his stupid ass sister, and rather than give us some insight on the character or new information about the crash that could be relevant to the story, we're instead distracted by the fact that Toby's name is technically Mr. Rogers. Actually, what really happens is that Slenderman shows up again, and then the scene just kind of ends without learning anything about what happened or anything about Toby or his mindset. So after that scene abruptly ends, we cut to Toby alone in his room at night again. He hears footsteps and giggling and Paranormal Activity 12, now showing in theaters, rated PG-13. He walks around for a while until he sees a ghost that is all his dead sister, but hyper-realistic and blood-eyed. It's so scary, you guys! So he freaks out and yells, "Aww!" as though he were looking at something really cute, but in a surprising way. I think you mixed up your exclamations there. Perhaps you meant ooh, as in surprise and alarm.
Oh, you mean sort of, ah! Yes, that's right. Oh! My God!
After that, he sees Slenderman again, now surrounded by what appears to be a sea of dead kids, because everyone knows if creepypastas are lacking in one thing, it's dead children. The Slenderman grabs him with his tentacles and Toby passes out for like the 7th fucking time this story. So he wakes up from that experience, assuming it was just a dream, and it seems for a brief moment like he's taken his brain medicine until he sees his dad, and voices in his head tell him to murder him. The voices drown out his rational thoughts and he starts laughing like a crazy person. Probably because he's a crazy person who eats his hands, sees hallucinations, and hears voices in his head. So Toby jumps his dad with a kitchen knife and tries to stab him, but his dad manages to keep a skinny 17-year-old off him for at least a little while. He doesn't put up nearly as big a fight as Clockwork's dad, though. At least his death isn't quite as gruesome. All Toby does is stab his dad, punch him in the face Star Platinum style, and then stab him some more in the chest. Shit, maybe he did have a stand. This story is awfully similar to Clockwork after all. So his mom comes in and is understandably upset that her son is now a deranged murderer. So Toby just runs the fuck out of there and into the garage. He finds 2 hatchets because apparently the whole serial killer with a knife thing is so overplayed in creepypastas, so he just needs something to make him stand out. And then he grabs some matches and gasoline and just burns everything to the fucking ground. He runs off into the forest as everything burns around him and he awaits death. Then Slenderman shows up one last time and takes Toby again. All according to plan? Okay, look, we're almost done here, but I have to say this. Slenderman usually has some kind of purpose or motive in stories he's involved in. In Marble Hornets, he's kind of like a virus that's trying to spread to other people using Tim as a host. In TribeTwelve, he's after a journal that contains the information needed to fucking kill him. But what is he doing here? What does he accomplish by doing this? How does having this kid murder his dad and burn down a forest aid Slenderman in any way? If he was just trying to get this kid to be a proxy, then why bother with pretty much all of that shit? Just take control of his mind and take him. No murder required. Whatever, the story's pretty much over. So Toby's mom moves in with her sister after Toby murders his dad, and they're watching the news when they find out that 4 middle schoolers had been murdered in the woods the night prior. The story could simply end as they describe the murder weapon, leaving it the tiniest bit ambiguous as to whether he survived or not, but they practically tell you as much by saying that his body was never found, and that's the end of the story. That's it. That's how it ends. Man, what to say about this one? Guys, this was bad. Like, grammar errors aside, this story had some potential at the beginning, but the instant we're introduced to our main character, everything just goes to shit, and all of the events that take place have no purpose whatsoever. For so much of the story, you're asking yourself, what was the point of this? Why did this happen if they didn't explain it? It affects so much of the story because it takes up most of the read time. This pointless filler shit. There's no reason for him to eat his hands off if it never affects the story. There's no reason to have Tourette syndrome if it's never brought up after it's introduced. For fuck's sake, there's no reason to have a main character if he's a gloomy, boring, emotionless shell that you're not gonna bother developing. It's seriously no wonder that the author has pretty much disowned this story. He's deleted it and all traces of it from his DeviantArt page and has made it clear in numerous posts that he no longer cares for the creepypasta community or his character. He even had to make a completely serious post that detailed that Ticci Toby was not a real person twice. I am dead serious. He doesn't seem like a bad guy, so I can't really give him too much shit, and he has taken the sort of thing in stride and seems to know the difference between constructive criticism and outright bashing, unlike some people. These posts aren't exactly funny like some people's were, but I'll leave a link to the Slenderman Connection wiki page where they were featured so that you can give them a look over yourself. I guess there is one kind of funny thing where he mentions that he didn't want people shipping Toby with anyone else besides Clockwork, but hey, I don't blame him. He doesn't exactly have many other options in the creepypasta matchmaking department. Can you imagine a hand job from The Rake? Very uncomfortable. So that's the Ticci Toby story, but we're not done yet. As always, it's time to look at the comments. Well, almost always. I didn't do it for the Sonic.exe videos because none of them were really funny. They were all basically the same two comments that talked about whether or not the story should have been deleted off of the wiki. Anyways, our first comment comes from Laughing Jay, who says, gotta take a deep fucking breath for this one. Man. On that somber note, we have Arsenal, who says, Slender Senpai saved him. Moving on from that, we have, I was smiling through all the killing and the part where he went insane. This just shows how much help I need. Oh well, I'm fine if they send me to a mental hospital. I have been took over by the creepypastas, guys. Ha 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 ha. Okay. Yeah, I'm done. Fuck this. I'm leaving. See you next time. That was too much.